Hello, my name is Andrew Annex, and I am a fifth-year PhD candidate in planetary sciences at Johns Hopkins University. Today, I am presenting an open-source Python library called ASAP Stereo, or ASAP for short, that I've been developing over the past few years for my PhD research. For my PhD research, I am measuring stratigraphy on Mars from high-rise derived digital elevation models, DEMs for short. I use the Ames Stereo Pipeline, ASP, to produce these DEMs, like this one of layered deposits in Caporo Crater. The reasons I use ASP are twofold. Firstly, I want as much control and understanding of my data for my research as humanly possible. And secondly, not all of my study areas have published stereo products due to the labor intensity of using socket set to produce these products. Using the Ames Stereo Pipeline gives me the freedom to ask research questions anywhere on Mars. Now, not everyone here works with stereo products or ASP, and a full demonstration of ASP and how it works is outside the scope of this talk. But at a high level, making a DEM in ASP requires a number of individual processing steps that are run in a system terminal. A simplified workflow generally goes: calibrate the data in ISIS, compute a DEM using the Ames Stereo Pipeline, and then finally align the DEM to reference topography using the pcalign command. With the Ames Stereo Pipeline, this may take on the order of 10 separate commands in a terminal. Each of these steps can take a large number of parameters to customize the behavior of the Ames Stereo Pipeline. Although this seems simpler than using socket set, it still leads to confusions and inefficiencies. For example, you may waste time between the steps of a workflow if running each step manually. Or you may run into an issue with the output from a step and need to retrace your steps rerunning commands until you end up with a better solution. A solution to these issues is to further automate your use of the Ames Stereo Pipeline with a workflow. For this talk, I define a workflow as any series of data processing steps or commands that must be invoked to produce a desired result. For the high-rise products I make for my research, I adopted David Meyer's ASP scripts project as the workflow I use to produce my science-ready data products. The ASP scripts project is written in Bash and combines dozens of ISIS and Ames Stereo steps to greatly simplify the process of making science-ready data products from raw high-rise and CTX data. Although the ASP scripts work very well, for my needs I found that I often needed to dig deeper into configuring the Ames Stereo Pipeline directly. I also found that certain steps in the workflow could produce bad results at times, and that correcting mistakes often required redoing work unnecessarily. As I began to modify the ASP scripts for my needs, I began to hit a ceiling with what I could do easily in Bash. And so I made a pivot to re-implement the ASP scripts workflow into something easier to modify, in this case Python. The result of that effort is my open source tool called ASAP Stereo, or just ASAP for short. ASAP is a re-implementation of the ASP scripts workflow with added enhancements in Python. ASAP exposes each step in the workflow as Python functions that can be called individually or in groups of meta-steps. There are higher level functions that simplify things further into a single command line function call to make a CTX or high-rise DEM. ASAP is able to download data from the PDS for the user and makes choices for image order and ground sampling distance from the metadata for the images. Because ASAP is written in Python, it is easier to implement advanced helper functions to reduce the amount of work for the end user, and provides a framework in which other workflows could be easily added, such as a workflow for LRO NAC, by reusing other Python functions in the framework. ASAP provides other benefits as well over ASP scripts. ASAP is a Python library, so it can be used directly in Python, but the main intended user interaction with ASAP is through the command line interface. I use a library called Python Fire to automatically generate the command line interface without the additional code burden to maintain from argparse, and it provides added benefits such as tab completions. Detailed logs including exact command arguments and wall times are included in output products and standard out. ASAP also follows the directory structure convention and naming conventions of ASAP scripts closely. One of the best features of ASAP are the Jupyter Notebook workflows, which capture logs and visualizations together into a single file that can be stored and shared with others so that they can be used to reproduce results. I will demonstrate and discuss this feature in greater depth in a few slides. There are other enhancements that have accumulated over the past few years. These include using my other Python command line tool, Moody, to grab required MOLA header data from the PDS Geosciences node REST API, using the Hillshade Align feature in PC Align to better align high-rise data products with reference CTX topography, including the use of g.dem Hillshade for speedups, and a stereo quality report feature initially developed by Ross Beyer to help better understand the relative quality of potential stereo products before any significant work occurs. There are, however, some important caveats to the use of ASAP that I want to note now. For one, ASAP is not intended to replace working knowledge of Ames Stereo, nor can it fix things for you. ASAP does not determine stereo parameters for the user, and understanding of what each Ames Stereo command does, its arguments, and its default parameters are still required knowledge to properly use ASAP. I feel ASAP best serves users with some familiar with the Ames Stereo Pipeline prior to using ASAP, not beginners. With that out of the way, I'll do a deeper dive into how ASAP is architected and demonstrate some of its functionality. Again, ASAP is a Python library with an auto-generated command line interface thanks to the Python Fire project. Here you can see me running a few of the top level commands to get the help information as you would see within the terminal. Internally, ASAP uses sh.py for subprocesses to interact with the various ISIS and Ames Stereo programs. As you can see, individual steps are exposed, however, the notebook workflow commands are still the best place to get started as a new user. Also, ASAP can be used directly in Python, which is useful for those who need lots of control over what choices ASAP may make for you. Here I'm just sort of demoing some of the functionality within the Jupyter Notebook, nothing too surprising. A point I briefly touched on earlier was that ASAP uses Jupyter Notebooks in a way that I think is very clever and can potentially be very useful for others listening to this talk, even if they don't use ASAP for their own work. ASAP, in addition to the Python library and command line interface, provides template Jupyter Notebooks that execute the workflows within cells in the notebooks using another project called Papermill, which turns notebooks into parameterized workflows. These workflows can be copied directly into Jupyter or created and executed from the ASAP command line interface. When completed, the outputted notebooks contain the logs for each function, as well as short descriptive headers for certain steps and embedded images of Hillshade preview products and the Ames Stereo good pixel maps to quickly determine the relative quality of the stereo products. If a single step needs to be rerun, the user can quickly reevaluate the step with different parameters until a desired outcome. Since the notebooks contain all the information needed to run the workflow, the notebooks can be shared with others who have installed ASAP so that they can attempt to reproduce results, or quickly inspect logs from Ames Stereo to determine where something went wrong. This functionality was particularly useful for cases when running Ames Stereo on remote computers to quickly view products without X-forwarding or other slow methods to visualize the products. In summary, ASAP was in part motivated by the complexity of implementing additional features in Bash for the ASP scripts project, and Python served as a better glue language for my needs. In addition, I also found that the richer visual previews I built into the notebooks for ASAP make it easier to communicate what I was doing. I think these lessons are useful independent of this work for others in this community. Okay, now for the fun part. Here I am going to demonstrate ASAP by making a CTX DEM using the command line to run the workflow from a Jupyter Notebook template. I am adding the flag downsample to reduce the resolution of the CTX images to speed up the pipeline for the demonstration. Although this will not accelerate the time required to download the raw CTX data from the PDS. and can be removed to produce higher quality products. I will start the process and then do a little movie magic to speed things along. Okay, now that time has progressed, we have finished our job. You can see that it took around 24 minutes to complete this job. Here I'm just echoing out the log of the bundle adjust script. You can see that individual steps have their own log files and they capture everything from standard out, and you can go ahead and see that the output is there. And now we're going to look at some of the final results. Again, ASAP follows the same folder layout and naming convention as the ASP scripts project, so the final products are in the results map BA dem align folder. So now I can show some of the really exciting things here in the output notebook log file from ASAP. So we can see that a lot of logs are being presented here. Here are the stereo config files as well as the injected parameters at the start of the notebook. Here we're just looking briefly at the stereo quality report. And at the start and end of each of these cells, you can see the wall times, the execution times of each command, and the exact command that ASAP executed to produce the processing result for that step. As well as you can see here some of the preview images injected into the notebook that are directly serialized in the file itself and thus renderable in any web browser. I hope that these logs illustrate the power of these notebook log files to convey not only what steps you did to produce a product, but as well as all the parameters required for someone else to reproduce that result. So I do have some long-term goals for ASAP for additional features that I have listed here, although my current work does not require these feature additions. The work that I've done so far, however, provides an excellent framework to implement these ideas. I think that these ideas would make an excellent contribution to the ASAP project, so if you would benefit from their addition, please consider contributing them to the project. In conclusion, ASAP Stereo is an open source framework for implementing workflows that involve ISIS and the Ames Stereo Pipeline. The docs linked here also contain more details on using ASAP, including how to set up ISIS, the Ames Stereo Pipeline, and ASAP in a Conda environment. It is available on PyPI and on GitHub, and is citable with the DOI listed below. Its development was funded by the MDEP grant number listed below as well. Many thanks are due to David Meyer and the Ames Stereo development team for answering many questions over the past few years. Thanks for listening, and please reach out if you have any questions.